Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Field Notes, the Infrastructure Podcast. I'm your host, Abby Crawford. And this show is all about the people building the infrastructure that powers modern connectivity, from fiber networks and broadband expansion to the leaders that are shaping policy, investment, and innovation across the industry. Today's conversation is one I have really been looking forward to, and I am joined by Gary Bolton, the president and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Gary, welcome to Field Notes.
Well, good morning, Abigail. Thanks for having me.
It is so good to have you here, Gary. I would love to just jump right into it and hear all about your background and just you. I mean, you've had such a diverse career across telecom and tech and large scale infrastructure. So I just want to hear what drew you to this space and what keeps you here.
Well, when I went to NC State undergrad, and not too far from you, and I tried to figure out what to major in, and my dad had said, "Oh, if you take engineering, then you can do anything." So I got my degree in electrical engineering, and guess what? You can be an engineer. And so that kind of surprised me so I had to do that for about 5 years. Then I went to Duke and moved more into the business side. But yeah, so I had kind of got into the tech field early on and started off with Northern Telecom there in the RTP area. And then we did a startup kind of when the internet was becoming a thing. It's kind of a very similar environment to right now with AI, but
Sure.
Mark Andreessen had created Mosaic, and now anybody could connect with the internet. And so we did a startup, a Silicon Valley-based startup with our R&D in Ottawa, and we were trying to, at the time, there was a voice network and a data network, and we were trying to converge it into a single device and created products around being able to take every phone line and then making it a DSL or data-enabled phone line. And so that startup went really well. We had a big exit, got acquired by Sienna, did a little stint at Sienna, and then we did another startup. It was on the Ethernet space, and we had one Bell South, and then it got acquired by SBC, which became AT&T, and then we won the whole health network in the UK. And anyway, 2007 happened and kind of crushed the capital markets. So I did another stint as a CMO at a public company, and then kind of really wanted to, what do I do with the kind of the end of my career to be able to take all the experience I had and be able to maximize the use of it in something that was bigger than just trying to sell widgets, but really to really elevate the quality of life for generations to come. And so we restarted the Fiber Broadband Association right during COVID. My predecessor, we were kind of at a point where we were almost insolvent because there was really just two revenue streams, conference and membership. And when during COVID, you have no conference. And
Right.
so we had to rebuild it with more, kind of diverse revenue and a reinvigorated mission to really focus on not getting glass in the ground, but really what is the end game, and that's really to elevate the quality of life. And so, we've had great success on really building momentum in the industry coming out of COVID, and now, we've been in the largest fiber investment cycle in history,
Right.
and now it's fueled with this huge investment cycle in AI infrastructure. And so it's this kind of really neat convergence or intersection between fiber broadband and really, elevating. It's as I don't want to say a tipping point as we move into the AI age. It's this just like we, mentioned starting off here. Kind of you all of a sudden have the Mosaic browser and everybody can participate in the internet. Well, then Chat GPT starts off. It's kind of clunky, kind of a novelty, and now it's
Yeah.
really, all those AI tools are driving everything and really going to change. And then we start layering in quantum networking. Those are all going to start building on each other. So it's just kind of an amazing time in history and technology. And so it's just great to be kind of at that intersection.
Yeah, you're in it. That's really interesting. And that brings me right into um, perfectly where the industry is today. We're hearing a lot right now about this just being a pivotal moment for fiber with everything that's going on. And I would love to hear from your perspective. Why is this such a critical time for fiber broadband?
Well, it's with COVID, the questions had gone away of, why fiber? Because, when everybody's working from home and having to do
Yeah,
online education and telehealth, it really accelerated, these Zoom calls and Teams and things
right.
like that. Everybody was forced to learn overnight. I was teaching at the university, and we got a email on Friday saying all our classes will be online on Monday. So, you
Craziest
had,
time ever.
yeah,
Yeah,
so it really advanced the use of online applications by about 5 years. And
yeah,
so also, we've been able to see a lot of companies like I just had Jim Stegman from CostQuest on Five for Breakfast, my little weekly program.
yeah,
And, he was talking about the latest, the FCC broadband data, the broadband data collection version 7. And now there's 1,562 fiber providers across the nation, which is crazy. So
yeah.
when our latest studies show, it used to be like AT&T and Verizon, the big guys were doing
Mhm.
fiber. And at the end of last year, 40% of all fiber deployed last year was from small providers. And so we're seeing a lot of private equity, a lot of investment. And, people hear about these public funding programs, whether
Yeah.
it's Connect America Fund, the RDOF or Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, or NTI's BEAD program and all
Mhm.
that. Well, that's only like barely over 8% of the overall investment. So,
Right.
close to 91, 92% of the investment is from private capex. And so companies like AT&T, going to do 64 million homes passed with fiber. We just saw Brightspeed just passed 3 million homes. We've seen there's 42 companies in the last 6 months, fiber providers that had doubled their footprint in 6 months. So we are seeing this big gold rush on, because what we're seeing, we're about 60% of the country is covered with fiber. We have about 60 million more homes to pass. But when
Right.
you look at the overall addressable market, it's more like 130 homes. And that was one of the things that came out of the CostQuest data, is that we're seeing a lot of overbuilding. And our studies have shown that if you're the only private provider, your take rate is about 45%. But
Hmm.
when there's two or more fiber providers, the take rate is 60% or greater. So there's lots of room for more than one fiber provider. And so we have a lot of market left to go as far
Right.
as not only passing just one home, but 3, 4 passings fiber per home. And then we'll see a network consolidation phase as companies either get acquired or to acquire to
Mhm.
aggregate markets that they want to build on for scale and so forth. So it's just an exciting time. And then
Is.
what you layer on top of that is, we saw AT&T recently announce a 250 billion with a B dollar investment in AI critical infrastructure with fiber. And
Yeah.
so we're seeing that, even all the hyperscalers, Meta did a $6 billion deal with Corning so we are seeing a lot of demand, and that's really taken fiber to the next level.
Yeah.
Um, and if I look at what's the future of fiber, when you're looking at data centers, what is king when you're, connecting all these racks of GPUs. Really exciting about this time is that these data centers, um, there's two things that are important in data centers. One is latency. So when you have
Mhm.
fiber, latency is so low, but when
Right.
you're thinking about the expensive GPUs and getting latency even lower, we have something called hollow core. So this is being developed as to instead of having a glass core that your light travels to, you create a vacuum. So the light goes even faster and you cut your latency in half, your delay in half. So that's, if you think about the high frequency traders back in the day that were getting these big advantages, microsecond advantages on trading by getting fiber in, Well, now you're seeing GPUs getting advantaged by even cutting that latency even further. And then when you think about all the fiber, this massive amounts of fiber, the cable sizes are getting gigantic. So being able to have multiple cores in a single fiber, you're able to significantly reduce the fiber size. And so it's just an exciting time with innovation. And so, what we see is the single mode fiber that's been used for fiber to the home, that will be the same fiber we deploy for fiber to the home and those kind of applications for the next century. But when you're thinking about in these data centers, you will start seeing some kind of, I call designer fiber, when you're being able to significantly reduce latency and cable size. It's kind of exciting.
It is exciting. And so with this level of momentum, it's so exciting to think about, but I'm very curious, do you feel like the industry is prepared for the scale of what's coming?
Well, it's interesting because we have some opposing forces,
Right.
and it's kind of unfortunate. So, for example, we have this BEAD program that it's been about 5 years since
Yeah.
Congress enacted the IIJA, the Investment in Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and it was really about getting fiber to every unserved and underserved home.
Yeah.
And that was just, as I talked to Jim Stegman yesterday, we were talking about what happened is Commerce has put their thumb on the scale saying, hey, we need to, not do fiber everywhere. Let's spread money around and let's invest in LEO satellites. And which is really weird because a LEO satellite now covers, you put a satellite in the sky and it covers every location. And so if LEO satellite could do the job, that area would be served. So it's considered
Right.
unserved if it's served by a LEO satellite. But if the government gives money to a LEO satellite provider to guarantee capacity,
Mm-hmm.
then it's served. So what we've done now is we've redlined about 880 thousand homes that are going to now be relegated to LEO satellite for the next 14 years and not be able to get other subsidies to be able to build fiber out to them, just because of this market distortion, what Commerce putting the thumb on the scale. So that's a
Yeah.
bit unfortunate for, nearly 1 million families that need this
Wow.
most. The other part of this is what we're seeing is that the quality of connection really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like Recon out of Analytics, they had this huge panel of subscribers, massive. And what they've been able to identify is that if you have fiber, that 45% of those fiber subscribers use AI daily. And then as the quality of connection goes down, whether it's cable, fixed wireless, DSL, down to satellite, less than 10% of satellite subscribers use AI. And so we also see the types of applications. If you're on fiber, you're using a desktop or a PC and you're doing all these real intense, like maybe you're doing video or work from home or online telehealth, where when you're on lower connection, you're basically on your phone, maybe doing some light social media and email and so forth. So the type of experience matters.
Sure.
The other thing that I think is really interesting is Open Vault. um, their data is actual true provider data. So they see all the internet data come through. And what their fourth quarter report showed from the same provider that's offering cable, DOCSIS cable, and fiber, that subscribers with fiber were using 66% more upstream capacity. And so it's the same provider to the same set of subscribers, but 66. So what it proves, and what their kind of takeaway was that when subscribers have the opportunity to have more upstream capacity, they'll use it. And as we start seeing more AI video and other applications, that will become more and more important. The other thing that's really interesting is on their data, they really show that we really have two tiers that people subscribe to. So there's a tier about 200 to 400 megabits, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what when people are trying to keep the lowest cost subscription, that's the minimum they use is 2 to 400 megabits, or they'll go and have the gigabit plus. They'll take as much, like I have 5 gig symmetric, so I'm going to take as much capacity as I possibly can. And so what's getting squeezed is a middle tier, kind of that 500 to 900, so either you want as cheap as service as possible with a minimum 2 to 400, or you want as much capacity as possible. And only 2.8% of the country is using 100 megabits or below, and that's only because they're relegated to that with some inferior service. So when a subscriber has a choice, what we're seeing is they need at least 2 to 400 to just be able to do the minimum. So anyway, some interesting things come out, and I think as we get more into quantum networking and AI applications, that's going to drive, because we're to this year, 2026 is the first year of full volume deployment of 25 gig PON. So we'll be 25 by 25 gig symmetric PON or fiber to the home. And, if you think about some of these when Congress considers 100 meg by 20 meg as a proxy for broadband, that is so incredibly dated. As I mentioned, no one that has a choice is using that tier. And but the government's put themselves in a pickle, because if they raise the definition to gigabit plus or any other thing, all of a sudden now all these federal programs like BEAD will now be what they're considered served, like by satellite, will no longer be served. And so they don't want to do that, because then it looks bad that they're spending all this money on stuff that has to be updated again.
Right. So you've had a front row seat of the evolution of this, if you will, and not just from, the technology standpoint, but also from a leadership standpoint. So that I want to kind of shift for a minute and just ask you, what are some of the biggest leadership lessons that you've learned throughout your career and, throughout the evolution of all this? What are your biggest lessons?
Well, I think number one is we have an amazing team at the Fiber Broadband Association. And, the biggest challenge I have is to get out of people's way. And so just empower the team to be able to be amazing. And so I look at the growth of the team and the things they're able to accomplish. And so one of the ways we do that is we have a psychologist on retainer, a performance coach.
Oh, wow.
And what I found through my career is that my employees like to tell me what they think I want to hear. And so I really never know what's going on in their head, because, when they have that moment with me, do they want to complain or do they want to say everything's great? And so then I think everything's great. And I find out that I'm doing things that are creating inefficiencies. And so they meet with our performance coach. Everybody in the staff meets once a month. It's totally confidential. And then our performance coach meets with me and tells me trends on things that I can do to improve efficiencies. And so that's becomes really valuable to me, is that I can modify my behavior and to make sure that everybody's able to, make decisions, be able to move things forward, to be able to, and that's, for my staff satisfaction, is to have a really important mission. So I think everybody on the team is totally bought into investing their time and to elevate quality of life for generations to come. So we all believe that this is a really important mission. They have very challenging work, and they have the ability to make decisions and to really be accountable, to own. If I have people running around doing what I tell them to do, then they have no accountability, right? It's well, Gary told me to do this, so I'm going to do it whether I bought in or not. And then that's not the team I want. The team I want is to have autonomy, to own their mistakes and their successes. And, so as a result, I've just seen this amazing growth and professionalism from our team. So, we've continued to grow. Our membership has grown. from 224 members to 660 member companies over the last 5 years. Our revenue's grown tenfold. Our events have grown. Our Fiber Connect, which is coming up. Again, we'll set another record. We've had 5 straight record attendance, and it's the largest fiber broadband conference. And even our partners are so invested.
Yeah.
We have amazing partners, strategic partners. But like, for instance, the AV guys, I want the experience when you come to Fiber Connect to blow everybody away, to be the best possible experience. And so I challenge them every year to how can we make the screen so impactful in the experience. And so, they get all excited because then they come up with curved screens. And this year we're going to have disaggregated screens because of all the market disruption. And so,
Yeah.
this investment in AV, really pushes them. And then our creative guys of, how are you going to fill the screen with impactful content? And then, what's our message, and make sure that even as we move forward, we always end up our conference with a summit. Last year was the State Broadband Officer Summit. This year, it's an AI and Next Gen Infrastructure Summit. So as we see the
Very
pivot,
cool.
as we move fiber from going to do fiber to home broadband connectivity to now enabling AI infrastructure and quantum networking and all the things of the future.
Love
And
that.
so kicking off that summit is my favorite quantum physicist, Michio Kaku. He's the father of string theory, and you've probably seen him on Discovery Channel and stuff. What he is brilliant at is on taking highly complex things and making them very understandable for the general public. And I love all his books and everything. So I'm super excited that he's going to be kicking off this summit. But again, it's really to help our membership and our audience in the industry help to how are they going to be able to participate in this future, kind of these tipping points that are happening.
Yeah, the key word that kept coming to my mind throughout everything you just said was collaboration, which is, of course, so important in any organization, but especially right now in this industry. How critical is collaboration right now across this ecosystem?
Well, so everything's been going really well at Fiber Broadband Association, but our membership vice president, Jennifer Bessel, hired a consultant, and wanted to bring in this consultant to study. And, it's like things are growing great. And so it's from a position of strength that we can really study. And one of the key insights they had is, what is the benefit? Why do people want to be part of the Fiber Broadband Association? And it's because we are where the industry's at. We are how
Yeah.
you participate in the industry. And it
Yes.
seems so obvious, now that I think about it, but I never had thought it in those terms. And so, we have these events all around the country, and we have just sellout crowds every time. And it's because, every single person, every single company at the Fiber Broadband Association is a competitor. But when they show up, they take their competitor hats off, put on their industry hats, and it's all about growing the pie and being able to create momentum and try to be able to, elevate the quality of life for generations to come. And so we have, gosh, about 19, 20 or 20 working groups that meet every month, and are, the amount of best practices they develop and research is phenomenal. So just some generation of all this work product, but also, Kim Ricard, one of our on our membership team,
Yeah.
when she's going around the country, she's at all the events and she's traveling around the country. So she'll put out to our membership, hey, I'm in Dallas. If anybody wants to get together, we'll have a member meetup. And I'm always shocked that 30 or 40 people show up, whether she's in Charlotte or out in LA or wherever, that because they all want to be able to engage, to be able to, whether they're talking to competitors, their peers, prospects, just members of the industry, it really creates this dynamic of collaboration of how do we, how do we solve things like permitting reform? How do we have best practices like micro trenching, or, so it's really trying to, reduce our cost on deployment. If you think of fiber, people will say fiber is expensive. Well, fiber
Yeah.
is not expensive, it's cheap. It's
Right.
just that 66 to 72% of the cost of fiber deployment is labor. And again, that's another area that I'm super excited about. We've been, we've had this thing called Optic Path, which is a program to train the next generation of fiber optic technicians. And now we have over 2,000 graduates, and that program is now, on its way to being rolled out to all 56 states and territories. So again, just on as people age out of our industry, all the demand for more fiber, and to make sure that we have, the wherewithal, the labor to be able to get this installed correctly.
Yeah, I love that you say that because that was one of my next questions is workforce, of course, has been a major topic across the industry. And I mean, like you said, when you're young and in school, you're like, what am I going to school for? Typically, typically this industry is not one that's
Yeah.
necessarily advertised. So I that's great. Because that will definitely be a challenge. But of course, programs like that will definitely create some progress there. With all of this growth and momentum, there are obviously still challenges outside of the workforce. And I'd love to get your take on what you see being the biggest obstacles within the industry right now.
Well, certainly deployment hurdles, so as we're starting to see BEAD funding start come in and all the private investment. And so it's really a challenge on making sure that locates, we can get
Mm.
locates done.
Yeah.
And so also permitting reform. So we're working closely with NTI and what we can do on permitting reform. So any of those kind of items that um, take time, it's time, increase costs and make it more predictable on deployment. And then again, all our working groups are working on best practices to help streamline deployment. And we also do a national deployment costs survey. And so we're able to benchmark what the costs are across different regions. So every service provider can sit there and look at their costs and benchmark it against industry trends so that they know that, what they're doing well and where they need to improve.
Very cool. Yeah. So on the flip side of that, of course, there are challenges, but there are also huge opportunities that maybe are not getting enough attention. Where do you see what are those biggest opportunities that we don't think we're you don't think we're giving enough attention to?
Well, I would say really I mean, I start off, it's 1,562 fiber ISPs. So certainly, private equity and private investment have got the memo that fiber is very accretive, that now's the time to build out quality networks so that you are in position that if you're trying to acquire networks or you're going to get acquired, or, we see this network consolidation, that your network's highly accretive. And also just on building customer experience. I was just in Iowa last week and I did an opening keynote on customer experience. So our marketing group had just finished a study and they did a webinar on customer experience. So, we're going to get beyond speeds very quickly. And it's really about, okay, as you are, one of three or four different fiber providers serving a community, how are you going to set yourself apart? And that's really about not only just providing a high-speed pipe, which all your competitors are now going to have, but it's how do you have that in-home experience and that's going to really be able to set you apart and really wow your subscribers. Because when you look at net promoter scores across every industry, the telecom has been the bottom.
Hmm.
And you might not like, in the past, your telecom provider. And so we really have to change that perception. And so that's really being able to have a great experience and being able to enable, these families to work from home, to do online education, to be able to have telehealth and all these things and then be able to move into the AI age. So I think there's just a great opportunity to really elevate the experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean that's the hard thing to do is taking the infrastructure and what it is and translating it into what it actually does for the everyday consumer. Like, how does this actually impact my life? So that's a very, I mean, that's what I do every day. And it's definitely a challenge, but it's easy when, of course, the industry is growing and it's becoming more and more popular. Like when I hear anyone in my family mention, like my mom said something like, "Yeah, we're getting fiber in our neighborhood." Just laugh. I'm like, "Wow!" Like I'm so proud of you for knowing what that is. Like that. She's like, "It's gonna be so fast. It's gonna be so great." I'm like, "I love it," but it is so cool that where we're headed and that brings me to my next question. What excites you the most about what's coming next for this industry?
Well, I really do think the tipping points are what's exciting to me. And, because we look at getting fiber to the home, we will get that job largely done by the end of the decade. So, of course, mission accomplished, everybody we connect with fiber, but
Mhm.
that is just the beginning. And, as we look at, um, you know, we just did a documentary called Thought Waves, and it's basically the intersection of computing, the internet, and fiber. And I listened to luminaries like Vint Cerf, was one of the inventors of the internet, and talk about whether it's the transistor or the mosaic browser or the iPhone or Chat GPT. We have all these moments that change everything. And we are at that moment. When I did my first startup, it was kind of exciting. I had to get out of corporate America so fast because I'm thinking, how am I going to explain to my grandchildren that I was not one of the people that were participating in the internet future, and so I wanted to do this startup with my friends and be part of that whole gold rush. Well, we're right now in that era when I look at market valuations of companies, and I was looking at that yesterday, and like Coca-Cola used to be the top most valuable company in the world. It's like caramel colored sugar water, right? Now, when you start looking at, the innovations, the companies that are up top are ones that are really changing the world. And so, I think it's just an amazing time. And I do think that we are on the cusp of being able to be the great equalizer, to be able to, when I think of the American dream, is to provide opportunities for everybody. And so, whether it's just, um, access to education, access to jobs, the ability, I live on an island and I can do this job, work in DC. It's, all my staff is virtual. I have employees in, Hawaii, down in Bogota, all over
Amazing.
the
Yeah.
Americas, and we can all work and be able to so the ability to let people live where they want to live, to be able to have the jobs they want to have the education they want to have. My doctors are all in Vanderbilt. I can't drive 12 hours to a doctor appointment, and
Right.
so it's great. I came off an event in Florida. I was sick as a dog. I woke up, called my doctor. 5 minutes later, I'm on, my telehealth session. He has my prescriptions ready, and I'm off to the races. I don't ever have to like get in a, I don't ever get in the car anymore. If, I have a guy that picks me up for the airport. Otherwise, if I can't walk or take the boat, I'm not going there. And, I think that's the way I'd like to see everybody be able to live, is they're not spending their life stuck in traffic, that they're able
Yeah.
to really, um, be able to fulfill their full potential as and living the life they want to live. And I think that we are very close to being able to provide those opportunities.
I agree with you. Before we wrap up, I always like to leave our listeners with something to think about. So, what is one thing that you think more people should be paying attention to in our industry right now?
Oh, that's a tough question. What I really spend my time thinking about is how to be on the right side of innovation.
Mhm.
And especially as you get older, you want to kind of not have to adopt all these new things that are happening. But there's either can be have innovation work against you or work for you.
Mhm.
And so I would encourage everybody to you know figure out how they can be able to leverage and take advantage of all this great stuff happening, because it is amazing. And you know, as we look at even community leaders, we see, this people worried about data centers, good, bad, ugly, and AI and all that and all this stuff. I think the potential outweighs the harm, and I think there's, as long as we can make sure that we put the right policies in place to, you know, really make sure that we're taking the best advantage of the innovation that's in front of us.
Love it. I agree. Gary, this has been such a great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your perspective and your insights. So thank you so much for joining me on Field Notes today.
Anytime, Abigail. It was great talking to you, and I look forward to seeing some of your podcasts.
Thank you. And to everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning into Field Notes. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to share it with your network and stay tuned for more conversations. That's it from the field. Stay grounded.